Right then, we're nearly at the point where we can put the upper decks on, but just like we did before, I want to blank out these windows at the back of these rooms, and I also want to glaze them with some acetate. So we'll take the acetate, we'll cut it into strips big enough to cover the whole area, glue it in with some PVA, and then we'll use the black cartridge paper to block out the back. I'm also going to block out this end here and do the same at the stern where we've got a small opening as well. So that should be all of this blacked out then. And then we're ready to put these upper decks on. So, cool. We're just using PVA glue here and some black paper to blank out anything on the inside and just make sure that we don't get any light passing through where we don't want it, so that the inside of the ship remains dark when you look through the glazing, basically. So where we've put the acetate in, because PVA glue dries clear, we can just liberally spread that over the surface of the acetate in the areas where we want the paper to stick. And that should give us, just like we did before, and the lower part of the hull will give us a nice glazed look and black everything out at the same time. You'll be amazed what light gets through if you don't blank things out. And the important thing is to ensure that your paper is not going to get in the way of any of the parts that you're subsequently going to fit, like this deck that goes above here. The paper's not so much an issue, but the acetate being a bit thicker can get in the way and cause you problems. There we go. So that's blacked out. Even these little areas here where the paper isn't touching, if you look through there, it's going to be blacked out. So that does the job nicely. Okay, we are now at the point in this build that I've been looking forward to, getting the detail onto this ship. So far, what we've been doing is progressing the basic construction of the Queen Mary 2, which has involved us doing some detail work through the necessity of that build process. But now we're at the point where we can start putting the photo-etch railings on, and adding various details that we want to do as we go. And I'm going to start at the bow, and then we're going to sort of move backwards more or less. So doing a little section at a time, and moving backwards. So we'll do all this bow area first, then we'll do this section here, which is quite complex, and anything down the sides, and keep rolling backwards is the general idea. So when we think about the bow, right at the front we have a jack staff to be added. If you have the platinum set, you'll have a brass one. Because I don't have those brass fittings, I'll be using the plastic one and making a small modification to it to make it look a little bit more realistic. We've got railings to add on here, railings to add along here. There's railings to be added in this area here, and we also have a grating. It's like a gutter cover that goes along the deck here. We need to put that in. So that's all of that is in the platinum set if you've got it. The gold medal models etch will cover the railings, it doesn't cover the gutter. And then as we move up here, we have some stanchions that we need to put in, and then when we get onto the roof, we've got some aerials and a little bit more scratch building to do. We've also got some touch up to do, a little bit of painting to do, varnishing to do, so we'll do all that. And then when we get to this point here, we've got some decals to put on, and possibly some more little walkways, and around about here there is a ladder, as well as some walkways, and we have the ladder in the Platinum Edition set. So there's quite a bit to go on, but it is going to make it come to life. One thing that I do want to point out though is these openings here in the forward superstructure. So if you've got the Platinum set, then parts 179 and 181 make a little wind shield which curves around here like so, which is subassembly number 23. Now this model and what we're building is as built. That is something that was added shortly after she was launched. So if you're doing the kit straight out of the box as she was launched, then those shouldn't be on. That's inaccurate, and those should be just left off, which is what I'll be doing. Okay, that's enough about what we're gonna do. Let's do it. So I'm just going to dry fit this first and see how this goes in. There's some little notches cut into the forward face of this so that it can go butt up against the propeller blades there. Yeah, so that seems to fit really nicely, so we'll just leave that there for a moment. And then previously we bent some railings when we were finding the location point for this ladder, so we have those. So let's have a look at those. Okay, so we need to just have a little play with those because they're not quite right as yet. Too sharp on our bend here.
And I think right at the end where the ladder is, because the ladder top is on top of the plastic, we might just cut out this little bit at the bottom here, which will allow that to sit either side of that without being in the way. That makes sense. That can be super glued in. Just want to take a little bit of, there we go. If you press on the bend, it just pushes it back slightly. See if we can correct that a little bit, get it to sit. Still a little bit sharp. There you go. And then that will come out and sit on there. Okay, I'm just going to do that modification. Okay, let's see if that improves things any. Blimey. So when it comes to photo etch, I always think if you can get it bent right so it sits correctly without glue, then the job of gluing it is much, much easier. There we go. So that's about right now. That's still slightly off, and we'll glue it further to the edge, but you can see that that's now not causing any issues to make it not fit. So that's that first section done. So the railing that does the rest of this is all one piece, and it does have, if you look very carefully, a couple of bends in it. So this end here has a small amount of railing that you bend in, which if I can just show you, you have to just watch out for it, but I don't know if you can see just behind that stanchion there is a little delicate bend in it, and the same is true at the apex here, and that is just there, if we can focus in. So again, just about visible. Now I think we can bend that with our Tamiya Photo-etch benders, pliers. Just press that, just make sure it's perfectly lined up. There you go. So that starts our apex. Now the rest of it is straight, so shouldn't cause us any problems. So let's just see how that goes down. Don't think that's far off, right from the off. Oh, bang on. First time. That's not a bad job. Okay. Now then. What worries me that we might have a little bit of a gap there. If I bring this other one up. Yep, we do. Okay, that's somewhat annoying, isn't it? Because we've bent this where the bends were on there. Okay, we might have to have a look at the gold medal models option. Right, so we should have another bend around about here. Let's just have a look at that. We'll get this formed up, and then we'll have a look at the gold medal models option. Okay, so that's done, but we've got a definite gap there, and this is why we always test fit all the components first, and don't just go, right, that one fits, glue it on. You've got to look at them and how they interact with each other, and that is not ideal. So let's just have a look at our gold medal models railings. Okay, I think I have a solution to our railing issue. When I look at the gold medal model rails, they're identical to our railings supplied by Pontos in the Platinum set. The spacing of the rails is exactly the same. What is different is the distance between the stanchions. You can see if I put them there. On the Platinum edition, the stanchions are much closer together, and I suspect that the Platinum kit etch is probably a bit more accurate. Also, this piece of railing here is the bit that gold medal models supply for going around here, and it's actually shorter because they work on the basis of leaving a gap, and we've positioned that based on the other photo etch, not this one. So this isn't going to work for me. I could probably remove this at this point, but I don't want to. This is shorter than the length of the other one, but what I can do is trim a little bit off the end, one stanchion's worth, and use that to extend this to fill our gap. So that is going to be our play. We're going to use the gold medal model etch just to plug that gap, and it should all look, when painted up, perfectly correct. So I'm happy we've now completed the railing task for the top there, so we can put them to one side for a minute. Right, before we talk about the railings and getting the railings to fit around the very front of the ship here, we've got the little jack staff at the front to put on. So the kit part doesn't fit. You're going to have to open the hole up if you're going to use the kit part. But there's a couple of issues with the kit part for me. Firstly, it looks a bit chunky, and secondly, it's a bit short, and thirdly, there's no yard arm on the top. So that really doesn't work for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scratch build another one. Now, if you've got the Platinum set, you'll have a turned brass alternative, which will be a much nicer and more accurate replacement. So let's have a go at some scratch building and see if we can make something that we can replace this with. Okay, we need to make it a little bit taller. I'm going to use the base as the same base, so we'll end up gluing this onto the base. So that's our bottom point. So I think just a fraction taller. So we're going to cut it there. So that gives us our upright. Now I'm going to do the yard arms slightly thinner. So the reason I've used 0.030 is I can use 0.025 for the little arms on it. So we'll do that in a sec. Let's just remove this from its base, first job. So if we clean that up, we can then glue that onto there. So I'm actually going to use 0.02 rod because it does look that bit better when you put it next to it.
So let's start by getting this onto a line about the right height. So maybe a little lower down. I want to use the grid on the cutting mat for alignment, you see. So about there. And if we bring that in, and they're not massively long, these things. So I'm looking at a picture as I do this. And I think that's about right. So if we cut another one, the same length, that's our two little arms done. So now if we put it back on its little guideline, actually I'm just going to turn this upside down because I just noticed that top edge is not dead flat, so we need to sort that in a minute. So that's about right. Right, get some extra thin liquid poly. Sticking to my tweezers for some reason. Right. Okay, that appears to be straight. I've wiped most of the glue off the brush. I'm just moving it to make sure it doesn't actually glue to the cutting mat, which it could do. Right, so get it all square again. I'll do the same with this one. Okay, that looks about right. Okay. Now then, we need a little section to go up the back there, like that, just a tiny amount. And what we will do is we'll put a little bit of glue directly onto the part, makes it sticky, and then just place it. Right, so as I look at that, I actually think these arms are a little bit too long, so I'm going to just give them another dab of glue from the other side, and then when I'm sure it's all nice and dry, we'll trim them back until it visually looks right. It actually makes it look a little bit shorter when they're a bit longer, and then we can attach to our base. There we have our new jack staff. So like I say, I'll just shorten the yard arms a little bit, and that's done. So we'll leave that to dry for a minute. Just remove the Photo-etch from both the platinum set and the gold medal model set for the railings that go around the propellers on the forecastle deck there. Now the one on the left is what Pontos supply in the platinum set, and the one on the right is the gold medal models. And the platinum set etch does look much more in keeping with the actual thing. What gold medal models have done is put a bottom rail on to aid with fitting. So actually there's no real difference. You can see there's a difference in the spacing of the number of railings if I put them together. But actually there's no real difference in height. There's a little bit, but not much. What you do with the Pontos etch is you roll it to form the shape. It needs to be bent, but then the three individual legs have a little tab on the bottom, and that gets folded up to form a foot, and that's what gives it some stability. So and a surface to glue on. So if we can form that and bend those feet over, it shouldn't be too difficult to fit. But obviously we can use the gold medal model ones if that is making life easier and we're struggling with the others. So we do have 2 bites of the cherry, but there's a lot of these to do because we've got 2 for each propeller. Just removed my railing, and I just wanted to show you how I go around getting rid of all the nubs on this with the best will in the world. Even using my little modified knife blade, which has a chisel point on, so that when I come to remove my Photo-etch from its fret, I can cut directly down, which should remove the nub. But with the best will in the world, occasionally you miss one. You don't get the blade quite as tight up to the Photo-etch part as you'd like. So even though this looks like there is no nubs on it, if I run my finger over it, I can certainly feel them. So there's different ways of doing it, but with railings, they're so delicate that you have to be very careful. So what I use is it's an otherwise end-of-life sanding stick. This was a medium grit, but it's been so heavily worn that it's actually a very fine grit now, and I just use this for Photo-etch railings. You can see all the brass on there, and basically
The way to go around doing it is find your nub, and just see one there. Hold the railing right close to the nub so that you're holding it straight, and there's the area that you're going to rub against isn't likely to bend, and then you just very gently sand that area, and you must do it in the direction of the railing. Otherwise, if you go that way, you're going to bend the railing. I'm guessing most people would know this, but if you're new to Photo-etch, it's a handy little tip. So I can just see there's a nub there. I can't see that. I can see it on camera, but not in real life. There we go, and that's completely smooth now. I can't feel anything under my finger. I'm going to use some frisket tape to put our Photo-etch on. As we bend it into shape, ready, we can put it on the frisket tape ready for painting. It's a great way of holding something down. It's quite tacky, but it doesn't leave any residues, unlike masking tape, and you're much less likely to actually damage your part trying to remove it, whereas you can do with masking tape. So I find this works really well. Another little tip is when you've got long parts like this gutter grating, and you're putting them on some tape to hold them down while you paint, then what I find works well is if you leave part of it overhanging, that way when you come to lift it off, you've already got a bit that's not stuck down that you can get underneath to help take it off. If you don't do that, then you're trying to get a knife underneath or something like that, and you're risking damaging it again. Right, we've got 16 of these little railings to bend for going around the propeller blades, and I'm going to try in the first instance to use my rolling tool for forming this. Now, in theory, if I can get it straight on top of, this is the smallest forming groove that we have, but in theory this should be able to bend it quite nicely. I'm also using my thinnest rod. Press gently down in the middle, it should sink into the groove and form the shape we're looking for. Now, my experiences with these small parts is if you press down like this straight on top, there is a possibility that this could flick off and never be seen again. Ask me how I know that. So I'm just going to plop my finger on the top of it as we press it down. Right, let's have a go at this first one and see what happens. I think that has done what we need. We'll just put it on its rail. There you go, we can see we've got a bend there. It's not too extreme, which is what we were looking for. I think that's about right, so I'm quite happy with that. Our next job is to then deal with these feet. So I'm going to try and do that with my tweezers, because they're only tiny. It's a little bit tricky bending the feet, to be honest. The risk is that you bend the whole stanchion and then you end up with something that doesn't look right, or you're trying to flatten again and re-roll. Right, let's see if this stands up in its own right. There we go. Just another 15 of those to do. And what we'll do is we'll put it on the Frisket foam for painting upside down, because we're painting the top rail a different colour to the rest of it, so it doesn't matter if that bit doesn't get painted. I noticed on that first part that we just made that it was picking up a little bit of dirt, so I'm just plopping some enamel thinners on just to clean the tool up a little bit. Obviously, if you've got something like rubbing alcohol, IPA, something like that, that'll do the trick nicely, but I don't use that, so I don't have it. So I find enamel thinners is a great little cleaner, cleaning palettes, your tool, whatever you need. There we go, that should be okay now. That looks better already. Right, I'll crack on and get all these formed and come back to you when that's done. A couple of little platforms we need to fold. These go on the little uprights behind the cranes. Now I just need to check, because I think at launch there was only one and another one was added later, so I just need to check that, but I'm going to do both of them so that if it turns out that it is supposed to be two, I'm ready to go. And if I only need to use one, it's not a big deal. So that's the first one done. And then there's a ladder that goes with it. The ladder has some big arms that stick out, so just need to be careful of those. To distort the ladder, so I'm just trying to sort that out. Yeah, there's a little bit of a twist in the ladder. Sometimes happens with ladders when you're filming them. Nearly there. Just pressing it down onto a flat surface to level it off. There you go, that's done. That looks right now. Okay, so we have some railings that we need to shape. We've got railings that are going to go along the outside edge here, and then we've got railings that go on the inside, well, I should say the outside of what I now call the sandcastle. So I'm having a look at this railing first. This shouldn't be too bad because we've got quite a gentle curve there. But the end here, and these meet in the middle, we've got a bit more of a curve. So I'm going to just try and roll that into shape. So first thing I'm going to do is just run this between my fingers and put a bit of a gentle curve in it. You can see that now. And we're going to be super gluing this down, so we'll sort of hold itself into place as we glue it. That's not far off. There we go. So we do have a little bit of a roll to form here. So if we can use the little join mark in the hull to form our roll. So let's do that. See, that's just starting to put a curve on. So let's just see how that looks. I suspect it won't quite be tight enough. Well, it's nearly there actually, it's not far off. So I'm just going to roll it on the rolling mat side of the tool. So that gives us a gentle curve. What we need to do is use a slightly smaller roller to give us a tighter curl. So I have some wood dowels which I can use. So just going to try that one. There we go. That's definitely more than we need. Okay, let's see how that looks. So if I hold that in place there, yeah, we're a little bit running between my fingers. Brass can be quite forgiving, so it'll allow us to mess around a little bit, as long as we're not too extreme with our folds. Right, so a little bit of a tuck in there. Right, I think we are getting there.
Doesn't have to be perfect, we just need to get an approximate shape before we put paint on. I think that will do what we need. I think just going to put a slightly tighter curl right on the end there. If we put a little, just right on the end there where it sort of curls in a little bit more extremely. There we go. And soften that bit. No, we're almost there, I think. I think that's as good as I need for being able to paint it. So, yeah, that's not looking so bad.
Now, I have to tell you that I'm immensely proud of the ship for many reasons, and one is Justin, that physics teacher that helped me change from chemistry to do the naval architecture, and he kept up with my career, even sailed on QE2 as a lecturer. But sadly, a few months before this ship was completed, Justin died of prostate cancer. And so hidden on board is a eulogy saying that it's only because of him and what he did for me that this ship exists today. And again, talking to the youngsters, I say it's very important that you recognize those that help you throughout your school and career, because one day you need to do the same. And that's why that envelope is hidden away, so that when the ship comes to be dismantled, the message will still be there. Now, one voyage I did was a real game changer in many ways, because we set off very late from Southampton. It was August 2008, and suddenly out of nowhere there was a force 12 storm. And because we were so late leaving Southampton because of problems with oncoming passengers, we had to travel quite fast. We couldn't manoeuvre away from this storm, and we were doing 24 knots in a force 12 storm, very much as the simulation had predicted. And they called me up to the bridge and they said, you know, other ships out here on the Atlantic are stopped or they're going backwards, and they call us and say, how are you able to do this? And they just say, well, we're the Queen Mary 2. What do you expect? And they all say to me that by comparison, QE2 was a cocktail shaker compared to this ship. And certainly I was on board in December when we crossed the Atlantic, and we had force 12 again, and we had 9-meter high seas, and we just went straight through it without any trouble whatsoever. Now, would you believe that on the day of the maiden voyage down to the Caribbean, very much like the trip we're doing now, Blue Peter came on board. And they caught up with me in the Britannia restaurant, and they said, all that time ago when you wrote and Biddy Baxter replied to say this wouldn't happen, through sheer determination and tenacity, you've done it. So it's time to get a gold. So you imagine taking that into schools is a real cool thing, as the youngster would say today. So Queen Mary 2 has been in service since 2004. She's even met up with her namesake, and they've exchanged greetings with the whistle. Of course, our friends, other companies have built bigger ships, fantastic ships. but they're not transatlantic liners or liners designed to go on the Atlantic in rough weather. Now, what would I do differently if one of you came up to me with 1.5 billion now? What would I do differently? Well, as I've said, there's no such thing as a perfect ship. The observation area at the top of the A staircase, I would have liked it so you could have seen the bow. It's a bit compromised because of the air conditioning room that's on top of the bridge. The gas turbines on board that we thought would save a lot of space, and that they did, but they're now very, very costly to operate because of the price of the fuel. So perhaps we would look at a different way than using gas turbines today. But the biggest problem, and thankfully that problem has now retired, is a former captain who actually is a very good friend of mine. He says that I should double the size of his cabin. Now that was dear Captain Opry. And I said to him, well, look, Kevin, I said, I've given you the best balcony of all. So I cannot finish today without saying something that is very, very important to me, and that the crew on here really make this ship. As fantastic as I am able to design it and the shipyard build it and outfit it, it's because of these guys that are working incredibly hard that really make the ship. And this ship is just so much scrap without the crew working hard, looking after us. And so real admiration for them and what they do. And of course, coming round again to talking to the youngsters, it wasn't only me that designed this ship. I may have drawn out the initial design and been in charge throughout the period, but it's a whole team. The shipyard, Cunard, the Carnival Group, we all worked together, we all had respect, and that's something I try and instill very much in the youngsters. But all of us here, us adults, we have a huge thing that we must do. We must all encourage the youngsters to do something ambitious. Because I grew up in a council house. I was the first person in my family to go to university, and if I can do it, all the youngsters that really need something, they could do it as well. And that is really down to us. So it's very, very important. So Queen Mary 2, she is my baby, most definitely. And if you want to go away and build one of your own, the Haynes manual, which I've written, and Prince Philip, who I must admit was a great supporter of mine, he agreed to write the foreword. So that's a possibility if you want to go and build your own. So, ladies and gentlemen, we finish Queen Mary 2. And I must say, I'm very biased that she's the greatest ship in the world.